12 Unexplained Mysteries That We Have Failed to Figure Out. You've most likely heard of the Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, and the lost city of Atlantis, two of the most widely known mysteries in human history. These are just two of the many unexplained mysteries that remain to this day. Even though our technological and scientific advancements have helped us clarify many bizarre cases and phenomena we once couldn't, that doesn't mean time or progress can always shed light on every mystery. Oddities continue to baffle modern science, and elude the growing power of technology as experts continue, in vain in some cases, to search for rational explanations to some of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries, which are as confounding as they are exhilarating. For example, most of us know and admire the magnificent Parthenon, but you might be surprised to learn that many mysteries surround this iconic structure's construction. Another example is the Babushka Lady, the unknown woman who was right in front of the action, when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. Who was she? Why was she there? Did she take photos of the assassination? We simply don't know. Take a look at these 25 unexplained mysteries that we have failed to figure out, to see even more mysteries that beg to be resolved. 1. The Lost Land of Paititi. A French writer and adventurer plans to explore one of the most remote parts of the Peruvian Amazon in search of a lost or secret city that may have been built by the Incas, but there are fears that the expedition could endanger the health of isolated tribes that have never been exposed to common human diseases. Thierry Jamin believes that the city, which he calls Paititi, could lie somewhere in a 215,000-hectare protected area called the Magantoni National Sanctuary in the Cuzco region of southeast Peru. The magnificent discoveries realized by my group in the valleys of Laco, Chunchasmayo and Cusirene in the north of the department of Cuzco lead towards a precise zone situated in the National Sanctuary of Magantoni, Jamin told The Guardian via email. Several natives of the forest, Matsiguingas, assert that monumental ruins exist at the top of a strange square mountain. I think that we are very close to officialize the existence of this big archaeological site. According to his website, Jamin is planning a 6-week expedition starting in July. He will be assisted by an NGO based in Cuzco that he leads and a group of Machigangas from a village near the sanctuary. His website describes Paititi, or Paititi El Dorado, as the Inca's secret city, one of the most fascinating stories of the Inca mythology, the biggest archaeological enigma of South America, and a place where the Incas hid all the treasures of their empire when Europeans invaded. The search for Paititi, or an Inca lost city, has attracted scores of people, and considerable controversy ever since the 16th century, with conflicting theories and ideas about where it might be and whether it really exists. But some experts fear that such an expedition would pose a threat to isolated indigenous Nandi people, sometimes called Kugapakoris, within the sanctuary. One of the main reasons for the sanctuary's creation 10 years ago was to protect groups of indigenous people who have had little or no contact with outsiders, and are extremely vulnerable to infectious diseases because of their lack of resistance. According to the sanctuary's master plan for 2007 to 2011, a 160-page government document outlining strategies and programs to manage the area, the 215,000 hectares are divided into a number of zones where different activities are permitted. The biggest, most remote zone is in the sanctuary's far east and is called the Strict Protection Zone, ZPA. Its first stated aim is to protect voluntarily isolated indigenous people, with scientific investigation only allowed in exceptional circumstances. Jamin is keeping the precise destination of the expedition a secret, but told The Guardian he intended to travel up the river Ticumpinia, not the river Timpia, where he said there were numerous Kugapakuri communities. "We don't want to tell anyone about our study zones, nor disseminate the exact locations of the sites we have found," he said. Lilis Rivera, who works for the NGO CEDIA and played a key role in the sanctuary's creation, pointed out that the presence of any outsiders in the sanctuary could cause danger to the people living there, and that entering the ZPA in particular is completely prohibited by Peruvian law. Any people currently living in the Upper Tampia or Tacumpinia regions are extremely vulnerable to germ transmission. That's the nature of living in relative social and immunological isolation, said anthropologist Christine Beyer from the NGO Capes Crusade Project, and one of the world's leading experts on anti-society and history. Jamin told The Guardian that he will apply to the Ministry of Environment, which oversees management of protected natural areas, for permission to enter the Magantoni Sanctuary. He said he has already applied for permission from the Ministry of Culture. However, Ramon Rivero Mejia at the Culture Ministry says it has received no application from either Jamin, any member of his team, or the NGO that Jamin presides over. Some experts doubt that Paititi is where Jamin thinks it is. The Incas conquered territories of the Machiganga and Pero and built roads, bridges and some fortified settlements, meaning it's possible that in Magantoni some Inca-type buildings and objects will be found, said Martti Parsainen, a Finnish archaeologist and historian who has researched Peru and the Incas for decades. Nevertheless, Paititi is not there. At first, it was located from the confluence of the Madre de Dios and the Beni rivers toward the east or south, but during the colonial period some Inca refugees probably re-established it near the present Brazilian Picos Novos Mountains. Asked by The Guardian why he thinks archaeological remains in Magantoni might be related to the Incas, Jamin said, "We don't know if they're Inca or pre-Inca. One of the objectives of our 2014 campaign will be to establish that." 2. The Mysteries of the Parthenon. It is a familiar structure and a hallmark of classical Greek architecture. The Parthenon, originally built in honor of Athena, patron goddess of Athens. Construction started in 447 BCE and was completed by 438 BCE. It featured tall columns and the building stretched to 228 feet by 101 feet. Scholars believe that it was built on the site of an earlier temple to Athena, one that was destroyed by the Persians at some ancient time. The timing was right. During the 4th and 5th centuries BCE, Athens became a central power in the Grecian area and was an important site for the arts and commerce. The building of the temple was costly and labor-intensive. Huge slabs of marble had to be moved from Mount Pentelicus to Athens, a journey of 10 miles. Additionally, an article in Smithsonian Magazine states that the cost was 800 silver talents, which was a considerable sum in an age when a single talent could pay a month's wages for 170 oarsmen on a Greek warship. For a structure that was meant to last forever in honor of a Greek deity, the Parthenon has seen its share of battles and multiple owners. In 276, Heruli pirates destroyed much of Athens, including the Parthenon. Approximately 100 years later, the structure was repaired, most likely during the reign of Roman Emperor Julian the Apostate, 332 to 363. After Christianity replaced the ancient Greek religion in the area, the Parthenon became a church dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and in the 15th century the building became a mosque for a time. Later, in the late 17th century, the Ottoman Empire's army conquered Greece and held little regard for the heritage sites such as the Parthenon. The Turks used the building as a storage facility for gunpowder, and soon after a Venetian mortar round destroyed much of the inner temple, killing almost 300 people. But the Parthenon is not solely the property of war scholars and cartographers. The building is full of mysteries that continue to puzzle historians and archaeologists to this day. When modern scholars began studying the building, they noticed that some of the marble blocks fit together with open spaces of a millimeter or less between them. How was this possible without modern tools? Also, the building employs the use of several optical illusions. To correct for imperfections of our sense of sight, the columns were widened by a few inches in the middle to make them appear absolutely straight, and the floor dips slightly toward the center to give the appearance of a clean and flat surface. In modern times, the building and its decorations have become the victims of civilized looting. In the early 19th century, A Scottish earl removed several of the statues from the site, saying he did so with the permission of the ruling Ottoman Empire. The modern Greeks disagree and are trying to get the statues back. The statues of dispute are currently housed in London's British Museum. Not forgetting the floor and the columns and the block alignment, the biggest puzzle is the timeline. According to ancient records kept by officials, it took 8 to 9 years to complete the building of the temple. This is almost too much to believe. A similar site in modern-day Turkey, a temple to the Greek god Apollo, took more than 600 years to create and was never finished. The repair work of the Parthenon has, to date, taken 34 years and is still ongoing. Skilled workmen can take up to 3 months repairing and rebuilding a single marble block. How were ancient peoples able to construct such a perfect building in such a short time, much shorter than modern craftsmen and modern tools can do similar work today? The Greeks of that time must have either had multitudes of workers toiling away at the single site or perhaps had a little help from the gods. 3. The Palpa Flat Mountain. The giant flat mountain tops at Nazca have remained a profound mystery for decades. Even today, archaeologists are unable to explain how and why ancient man created massive, flat runway-like marks thousands of years ago. We have all been fascinated by the Nazca and Palpa lines for decades. These incredible pieces of ancient art are located in the arid Peruvian coastal plain approximately 400 kilometers south of modern-day Lima. The staggering geoglyphs cover around 450 kilometers, and were created on the arid floor sometime between 500 BC and 500 AD. The Nazca and Palpa lines are considered one of archaeology's greatest mystery, mostly because of their size, quantity and nature. Some of the lines depict living creatures, stylized plants, and imaginary beings, as well as geometric figures several kilometers long. According to studies, the largest of the Nazca figures is approximately 1,000 feet, and the longest geoglyph goes on for around 9 miles. However, the most mysterious discovery at Nazca are the enigmatic mountain tops that eerily resemble modern-day runways. The mountain tops of some of the surrounding mountains at Nazca look as if something literally pressed down, with incredible force, the top of the mountain. Many researchers have said that the mysterious mountain tops look as if something managed to perfectly cut through the mountain top, creating incredible flat surfaces. So how is it possible that these giant runway-like mountains even exist? And if the Nazca are known for having created the incredible desert art, intricate figures of animals, plants and geometric shapes, why would they even bother and create these huge flat surfaces? There are numerous questions that remain unanswered at Nazca. Were these giant figures meant to be seen from above? Do they mimic constellations in the sky? What were the ancients trying to say to future generations? Were the Nazca lines mere ancient art? If so, why would ancient mankind create art that cannot be fully appreciated from the ground? Is it possible that, as ancient astronaut theorists suggest, the ancient runways seen at Nazca are in fact navigational markers used by advanced extraterrestrials which visited the area thousands of years ago? And is it possible that some of the giant, flat triangles were created by massive spacecraft that touched down in the distant past? What if the gods used these paths in the distant past to visit the people in Peru? And what if ancient people created figurines such as the Nazca astronaut in honor of those gods who came from above? Interestingly, according to some local legends, the mysterious Incan creator god Vioracaca commissioned the Nazca lines and cliffs in the past. These lines are said to be created by the Vioracaca himself. He was the great teacher god of the Andes. Skeptics remain positive that these giant figures, flat mountain tops, were not created by advanced flying machines. But, could the ancient Nazca people have created perfectly shaped triangles, thousands of meters in diameter with their feet as some researchers suggest? And if so, then how can we explain the flat mountain tops located around the Nazca lines? Today, when it comes to the Nazca and Palpa lines, the most accepted theories are that these are giant astronomical calendars, ceremonial sites, coordinate systems, and last but not least, giant landing strips created by our cosmic neighbors thousands of years ago. What do you think they are? 4. Kenneth Arnold's flying saucers. On June 24, 1947, an amateur pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying a small plane near Mount Rainier in Washington state when he saw something extraordinarily strange. Directly to his left, about 20 to 25 miles north of him and at the same altitude, a chain of 9 objects shot across the sky, glinting in the sun as they traveled. By comparing their size to that of a distant airplane, Arnold gauged the objects to be about 45 to 50 feet wide. They flew between 2 mountains spaced 50 miles apart in just 1 minute, 42 seconds, he observed, implying an astonishing speed of 1,700 miles per hour, or 3 times faster than any manned aircraft of the era. However, as if controlled, the flying objects seemed to dip and swerve around obstacles in the terrain. When the objects faded into the distance, Arnold flew to Yakima, Washington, landed and immediately told the airport staff of the unidentified flying objects he had spotted. The next day, he was interviewed by reporters, and the story spread like wildfire across the nation. At that time there was still some thought that Mars or perhaps Venus might have a habitable surface. Robert Schieffer, an author of UFO books, and a skeptic, told life's little mysteries. People thought these UFOs were Martians who had come to keep an eye on us now that we had nuclear weapons. As time would prove, this was but the first of many outlandish theories behind visits of an extraterrestrial nature. The era of UFO sightings had begun. Reporting error. Arnold's sighting was such a sensation that it made front-page news across the nation. UFOlogist and author Martin Kottmeyer wrote in an article, "The Saucer Error, Real News, 1993. Soon everyone was looking for those new aircraft which according to the papers were saucer-like in shape," Kottmeyer continued. Within weeks hundreds of reports of those flying saucers were made across the nation. While people presumably thought they were seeing the same things that Kenneth Arnold saw, there was a major irony that nobody at the time realized. Kenneth Arnold hadn't reported seeing flying saucers. In fact, Arnold had told the press that the objects had flown erratically, like a saucer if you skip it across the water. They were thin and flat when viewed on edge, he said, but crescent-shaped when viewed from the top down as they turned. Nonetheless, a reporter named Bill Bickett of the United Press interpreted Arnold's statement to mean that the objects he saw were round discs. According to Benjamin Radford, UFO expert and deputy editor of the Skeptical Inquirer, it was one of the most significant reporter misquotes in history. The phrase flying saucers provided the mold which shaped the UFO myth at its beginning, Kottmeyer wrote. UFOs took the form of flying saucers, he noted, in artists' renderings, hoax photos, sci-fi films, TV shows and even the vast majority of alien abduction and sighting reports for the rest of modern history, up until the present day. Bickett's error may not prove to be the ultimate refutation of the extraterrestrial theory for everyone. But it does leave their advocates in one hell of a paradox. Why would extraterrestrials redesign their craft to conform to Bickett's mistake? Kottmeyer wrote. For the birds. Though he didn't see flying saucers, most of Arnold's contemporaries believed that he really had seen something that day. The Army report on the sighting states, if Mr. Arnold could write a report of such a character and did not see the objects, he was in the wrong business and should be engaged in writing Buck Rogers fiction. His account was very convincing. So if he did see something, what was it exactly? One theory holds that it was a fireball, a meteor breaking up upon entry into the atmosphere. If a meteor hit the atmosphere at a shallow angle to the Earth, its pieces would approach the surface traveling almost horizontally. Furthermore, the pieces of meteor would travel in a chain like the one Arnold saw, would shine very brightly, and would travel at thousands of miles per hour. But most historians think the objects weren't from outer space at all, it was probably pelicans flying in formation, Schieffer said. Probably Arnold misjudged the distance and thought they were huge objects at a great distance but they were actually much closer. After all, The boomerang shape that Arnold drew in a picture of the objects he had seen looks very much like a bird with its wings outstretched. 5. The mystery of the Summerton Beach Man. An unidentified man was found dead on Summerton Beach, Adelaide, Australia, on December 1, 1948. He had an athletic V-frame physique and yet was 40 to 45 years old. The man wore a smart suit and tie, but the labels were removed from his clothes. There was no ID on the body and there were no signs of violence. The dry sand around him was undisturbed. The mystery deepened when the autopsy was unable to find a cause of death. To this day we don't know who he is or how he died. Was he poisoned or did he die accidentally? Why were the labels removed from his clothes? Was he a secret agent or a jilted lover? Intriguingly, a slip of paper was found in one of his pockets with the printed words Tamam Shad, meaning "and a door" finished in Persian. It was torn from a page of a book of poetry, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. No one reported him missing and no one was able to identify the corpse. In desperation, the police asked the public to check their copies of Omar Khayyam for a torn page. A most surprising break occurred 6 months after the death. A local man handed in the correct book. He reported that he found the book on the back seat of his car some 6 months earlier. Just an enigma. The police found a phone number penciled on the back of the book in tiny handwriting. The phone number led them to a house that was only a short 5-minute walk from where the man was found dead. A 27-year-old woman answered the door. She denied any knowledge of the man and the police found her evasive. The woman told the police that she was married. However, recent investigations have revealed that she was not married until 1950. She told the police that she was a nurse, although new findings show that she had not completed her final nursing exams due to a pregnancy. As the funeral of the man had taken place, the police took the woman to see a plaster bust that was molded from the cadaver to see if she could recognize the man. She stared at the floor for the whole interview with her eyes averted from the bust. Despite this, the police astonishingly dropped their best lead and agreed to not release her identity to the press. The media referred to her using the pseudonym Justin, although investigators knew her true identity. In 2013, her daughter came forward on a television documentary on Justin's real identity, Jessica Jo Thompson, née Jessie Ellen Harkness, b. 1921, d. 2007, finally became public. She was generally known as Jess Harkness, and then after 1947 as Jo Thompson. Was the Summerton Man an American? The Summerton Man possessed a number of items that raised the question of him being American or perhaps having lived in the USA. There was a packet of Wrigley's chewing gum in his pocket. In the 1940s it would have been much more common for a US adult to chew gum than an Australian. The stripes on the man's tie slanted the US way, and not the British or Australian way. The jacket he was wearing was determined to be of US origin, due to the machine feather stitching. The man possessed an aluminum comb. These were rare in Australia at the time, and the police indicated that aluminum combs were associated with US personnel. The Summerton Man's putative son. Here's where the story becomes stranger than fiction. Back in 1949, it was noted the Summerton Man had pronounced calf muscles high up the leg, as if he were trained as a ballet dancer. It transpires that Jo Thompson's son, Robin McMahon Thompson, b. 1947, d. 2009, became a professional ballet dancer. Is this purely a coincidence? The evidence that Robin Thompson may well be the son of the Summerton Man becomes rather compelling when we find that they share a rare dental trait. They both have their canine teeth next to their central teeth. Moreover, there's a rare feature of the ear shape that both men share. DNA extraction. Full extraction of the Summerton Man's autosomal DNA will not be possible until the South Australian Attorney General gives official approval for an exhumation. This form of DNA allows one to find cousins on a genealogical database. This is how experts find the birth parents of adopted children, by triangulating the family tree from DNA cousins. Samples of the Summerton man's hair exist in a museum, but unfortunately concentration levels of viable autosomal DNA are too low in such old hair. As an initial test, the University of Adelaide team successfully determined that the Summerton man's mother belongs to DNA haplogroup H. Sadly, Robin died of prostate cancer in 2009. He was cremated, and so his DNA is unavailable. However, Robin's DNA profile has been obtained indirectly by subtracting the DNA of his spouse, Roma Egan, from his descendant. This is called phased DNA. A DNA heritage admixture test shows that Robin possesses a small percentage of Amerindian. Robin's maternal line is well documented, and so this result points to a paternal American line. The Thomas Jefferson link. By scanning genealogical DNA databases, it turns out that Robin has a large number of cousins in the USA. More significantly, 40 of the closer matches tend to have roots in Virginia. Some of these are connected to Thomas Jefferson's tree who consistently match with Robin on chromosome number 8. Remarkably, Robin is within the third cousin range to a direct descendant of Jefferson's grandfather, Isham Randolph. Of course, there is further research to do, and the hypothesis that the Summerton man is American needs further testing and verification. The current overall evidence is sufficiently compelling for investigators to focus efforts on the USA as a key to this puzzle. For example, searches of U.S.-Australian ships' passenger logs, for the 1940s, now become a tantalizing line of inquiry. 6. The lost cosmonauts of the Soviet Union. We all know that Yuri Gagarin was the first man in space. But what if he wasn't? What if the truth were more complex, and that Gagarin's true feat was being the first man in space who survived? The space race was the best thing to come out of the Cold War. The tensions between the US and the USSR threatened to destroy the world, but they also sparked the greatest advancements in human history. Both nations were desperate to beat the other, and for a while the Russians had a distinct advantage, with Sputnik being the first artificial satellite put into orbit and then Gagarin being the first human to escape Earth's atmosphere. The competition was so fierce that safety was sometimes a secondary concern. There were some in the US government who thought we should send an astronaut on a one-way trip to the moon so we could get there first. Once the astronaut was on the moon we could then begin worrying about how to bring him home. That recklessness, and the Soviet Union's penchant for denials and cover-ups of setbacks and disasters, led to rumors of a top-secret Soviet space program that was sending humans into space long before Gagarin's journey. As far back as 1959 there were stories circulating that the Soviets had lost multiple cosmonauts, including a woman, in attempted suborbital flights. Some of those rumors came from misunderstandings, such as the 1962 death of Colonel Pyotr Dolgov. Dolgov parachuted from a balloon at almost 94,000 feet but didn't survive. He hit the visor of his helmet while jumping from the balloon gondola and his suit depressurized, killing him. At least that's the official story. Some of the lost cosmonaut theories have the spacefarers dying in space or on the launch pad. But the conspiracy theory surrounding famed Soviet test pilot Vladimir Ilyushin is much more entertaining. Ilyushin, some claim, beat Gagarin to space by 5 days, launching on April 7, 1961. But Ilyushin's trip didn't make the history books because it was a major embarrassment to the USSR, as a malfunction supposedly brought Ilyushin's capsule down in China. He was taken prisoner and held for a year. There's some plausibility to this tale, especially when you realize that unlike the US space program the Russians kept their launches secret. Gagarin's feat was only publicized when he got home safely, so is it impossible that Ilyushin's mission would be scrubbed from the records? In 1999 Nikita Khrushchev's son told documentary filmmakers that the story was true, but Ilyushin himself never spoke of it, taking the truth to his grave in 2010. The spookiest and strangest lost cosmonaut story actually has audio evidence to back it up. In 1960, Italian brothers Achille and Giovanni Giudico Cordiglia set up an amateur radio listening station and began picking up transmissions from space. They listened in on and recorded some huge moments in space history, including Gagarin's first flight and John Glenn's conversations with Mission Control from the Friendship 7 capsule. But they also claimed they picked up secret transmissions, and some of what they heard was terrifying. That first year they claimed to hear 2 different Soviet space capsules get lost in space, with one sending an SOS message that got fainter as it drifted off into the interstellar reaches. In 1961 they listened in as a capsule orbited the Earth 3 times. Days before Yuri Gagarin's launch, did they hear Ilyushin's ill-fated trip? That year they picked up the sounds of a cosmonaut suffocating to death. They listened in as a number of Soviet capsules supposedly veered off course and disappeared into the solar system. The most blood-curdling recording the Giudico Cordiglia brothers made captures the sounds of a female cosmonaut burning upon re-entry in 1963. "Come in! Come in! Come in! Listen! Come in! Talk to me! I am hot! I am hot! Come in! What? 45? What? 50? Yes. Yes, yes, breathing. Oxygen, oxygen. I am hot. Isn't this dangerous? Transmission begins now. 41. Yes, I feel hot. I feel hot, it's all hot. I can see a flame. I can see a flame. I can see a flame. 32. 32. Am I going to crash? Yes, yes, I feel hot. I am listening. I feel hot, I will re-enter. I'm hot. Experts have questioned the veracity of the recordings, but it remains possible that the Italian brothers did stumble upon the dark truth behind one of the great legends of the Cold War. 7. The Black Knight Satellite. A legendary alien satellite that is said to have orbited Earth for nearly 13,000 years, has been twice caught on camera passing the International Space Station, ISS, and the Moon, UFO hunters claim. Footage which could show the mysterious Black Knight satellite passing the ISS emerged on YouTube following an earlier photograph, which appeared to show it pass the Moon, during July 31st's Blue Moon, 2 full moons in the same month, event, according to alien researchers. Now a separate clip has emerged said to have been taken on July 31st by another person, which appears to show the object passing the Moon on video. Sarah Roth, from the U.S., posted a link on this story to a YouTube video she uploaded of the sighting filmed from an undisclosed location. She posted with the video, "Last night while taking pictures and video of the blue moon, a black object went hurling past. Could be any number of things from space debris, Black Knight satellite to UFO. The Black Knight satellite is the name that has been given to an object captured on camera by NASA astronauts during a 1998 space shuttle mission. There are alien conspiracy theorists who claim the satellite is an object of extraterrestrial origin, possibly up to 13,000 years old orbiting Earth in near-polar orbit." Now YouTube UFO channel, Mr. Enigma, has posted a video entitled Black Knight Satellite seen right in front of ISS camera. It purports to be a recording taken from the NASA ISS camera, and shows a strange object floating seemingly at the same speed as the space station for about 6 minutes before slowly fading away. The video maker posted subtitles on the film adding that he initially thought it was part of the ISS until it disappeared and posed the question, could this be the famous Black Knight satellite? Viewers of the footage seem intrigued by it. One posted, "Very strange activity and it does look a bit like the Black Knight satellite." Another added, "Very interesting, you can see the lights on the hull of the craft change colors especially early in the footage." However, Mr. Enigma, a channel run by Robert Simmons, based in Wisconsin, USA, has been accused before of posting hoax UFO footage in the past. Several claims were made that another video released by Mr. Enigma, of a UFO appearing to pass a tree, was a CGI hoax, after the tree was found to have been made by repeatedly using the same section of a real tree. He has denied hoaxing his videos. Mr. Enigma's new Black Knight video followed the posting on a US UFO sighting website of a photograph of the moon taken during the Blue Moon event of July 31st. It shows an odd-shaped object which viewers have also suggested looks like the Black Knight satellite. The unnamed witness who posted the picture said, "I was taking pictures the night of the blue moon in West Covina, California, somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m. I noticed the triangular object when I was checking my pics the next day. The dark triangle or delta-shaped object is located on the lower left side of the picture of the moon. It looked like a craft of some sort to me. I'm not sure, so I'm looking for some feedback as to what it is." One viewer asked, "Is that the Black Knight satellite passing the moon?" The legend of the alien satellite seems to have retrospectively started in 1899 when Nikola Tesla announced he was picking up radio waves coming from space, prompting people to suggest something alien was out there. Experiments in 1928 in Oslo, Norway, picked up the same signals. In 1954, U.S. state newspapers carried quotes from Donald Keyhoe, a retired naval aviation major and UFO researcher, claiming the U.S. Air Force had detected 2 satellites orbiting Earth, despite none yet being launched from our planet. Time then ran a 1960 piece, following the launch of satellites from Earth, stating that the U.S. Navy detected a dark object, possibly a Soviet spy satellite, with a highly irregular orbit. The myth developed in 1963 when NASA astronaut Gordon Cooper was reported as saying he had seen the Black Knight satellite while in space, but there was a media blackout upon his return and the U.S. Space Agency allegedly put it down to cosmic hallucinations. It has been reported that a decade later in 1973, a researcher from Scotland, Duncan Lunan, looked back at the Norwegian scientist's data from 1928, before claiming the messages suggested the Black Knight was sent by aliens from Epsilon Brutus, as a welcome message to Earth 12,600 years ago. In 1998, the first alleged photographs of the satellite emerged and were taken by astronauts on the Space Shuttle Endeavour, as it made its first flight to the ISS. However, many skeptics claim the legend was retrospectively created after the 1998 pictures emerged, with the preceding odd events weaved into the story to make it more convincing. The noises from 1899 and 1928 remain a mystery, but the possible causes do not so far include an alien satellite, according to scientists. They insist research shows that in 1954 Mr. Keyhoe had been promoting a UFO book and the articles had been written in a tongue-in-cheek fashion by the papers. A follow-up, but less widely read, article in Time also confirmed that the strange satellite had in fact been the remains of an Air Force Discoverer satellite that had gone astray, they found. There are reports that Mr. Cooper, although maintaining he saw a number of UFOs in space, never claimed to have seen the Black Knight satellite on that mission or at all. Yet David Bryant, a UK astronomer and ufologist, said he had discussed the Black Knight with several NASA astronauts and one assured him, "It's a satellite, we just don't know where it came from." And Mr. Lunan is also later reported to have denied suggesting any alien satellite had its origins 12,600 years ago, and that his conclusion that the noises were a star map were from unscientific methods. NASA has since explained the 1998 images as being a thermal blanket lost by the shuttle crew. Martina Redpath of Armagh Planetarium in Northern Ireland, who researched the legend, concluded, "Black Knight is a jumble of completely unrelated stories, reports of unusual science observations, authors promoting fringe ideas, classified spy satellites and people over-interpreting photos. These ingredients have chopped up, stirred together and stewed on the internet to one rambling and inconsistent dollop of myth. So if the Black Knight satellite never even existed, what could the new objects caught passing the ISS and moon be?" 8. The abandoned lifeboat at World's End. Bouvet Island is the most isolated uninhabited place on Earth. When people say out in the middle of nowhere about an area where they could potentially walk to civilization, they are not thinking of Bouvet Island. Imagine a place that is nearly covered in ice and surrounded by the coldest ocean in the world, and you would have a good idea of what Bouvet Island is like. It is not Antarctica, but Antarctica is the closest piece of land to the island. Bouvet Island is situated between the tip of Africa and the coldest continent on Earth. It is not the sort of place where it is likely you would find yourself shipwrecked. It is hard for even people who know where it is to find it. How is then that an expedition discovered an abandoned lifeboat on Bouvet Island? Only the most adventurous travelers visit Bouvet Island, and only a very unfortunate soul would wind up there in a lifeboat, unless it was a landing craft. Most modern expeditions onto the island are made by helicopter because landing a boat on Bouvet Island is difficult under the best conditions and impossible under average conditions. It is 90% covered in glaciers, under which is an active volcano. The sides of the island are almost all sheer, icy cliffs. Let's put it this way, if you find yourself lost and stuck on Bouvet Island, you will probably be spending the rest of your now short life there with no food and maybe water, if you have something with which to melt ice. Because of its location, weather researchers have long thought it a great place to put a weather tower. In 1964, Lieutenant Commander Alan Crawford was sent to the island to investigate a new area of the land, created by lava flow 10 years prior to the expedition. He and his team landed via helicopter and began checking out the landscape. There, Crawford saw a lagoon with a very strange feature, an abandoned lifeboat. Crawford later reported that the abandoned lifeboat on Bouvet Island had no markings on it that would suggest its origins. It also had no motor and no sails. He found the oars on shore, along with a flattened copper tank and a barrel. He was unable to do a thorough search of the area, given the harsh nature of the terrain and the work he had come to do, but what he was able to search of the landscape turned up nothing else. There was no evidence that people had stayed on the island or died on the island. There was nothing. 2 years after Crawford's Bouvet Island expedition, another expedition did a survey of the area around the lagoon. They described the lagoon, but made no mention of a lifeboat, so it must have disappeared by then. But where could it have gone? It is unlikely that another expedition would have retrieved it, as dragging an extra boat back into the water or bringing a lifeboat onto a helicopter are far-fetched scenarios. There is the possibility that it sank into the lagoon. However, without knowing how deep the lagoon is, it is hard to say. All we do know is that Crawford's lifeboat is gone. As for the origins of the lifeboat on Bouvet Island, no one has come forward to say it was theirs. It could have been left by an expedition, but the lagoon was no more than 10 years old, so there is only a small space of time during which the lifeboat could have appeared. Research into who visited Bouvet Island during that 10-year span has turned up nothing about an abandoned boat. It seems unlikely that the lifeboat came from a shipwreck, as Bouvet Island is a small speck in a vast land-free ocean. Visibility is extremely poor, as well. Then, there is also the question of why the boat was left there at all. Did a shipwreck victim or the victim of a failed expedition die there? If so, why did he not use his boat for shelter? Why did he not camp near the lagoon? Did he camp, but have the traces of his stay later wiped out by the weather? There are just too many unanswerable questions regarding the mysterious lifeboat of Bouvet Island. It seems we will never know if it signified a disaster or if it was simply unable to return to a bigger ship during a successful expedition. 9. The identity of the man in the iron mask. Lomeo Masktafer, the man in the iron mask, is the name given to a prisoner arrested in c. 1669, and condemned to the cruel fate of having his head clamped within an iron mask, or so the story goes. The legend of the man in the iron mask is based on the true life story of Ustash Dodger. Over time, however, the story became legend, and the legend faded into myth, retold dozens of times in children's books, novels, and movies throughout the world. Much of what we know about Ustash Dodger comes from the correspondence between his jailer, Benign Dovan de Saint Mars, and his superiors in Paris, so there is very little information about him prior to his prison time, such as the circumstances of his arrest, and how came to be wearing the mask. Incidentally, there is no historical evidence to suggest that the mask was made out of anything but black velvet. It is believed that it was only later that stories came to refer to an iron mask. The earliest record of the masked prisoner dates to 1669 AD, and was a letter sent from the Marquis de Louvaise, King Louis XIV's minister, to Benign Dauvin de Saint-Mars, governor of the Pinerol prison in Pinerolo, Piedmont, then part of France. In his letter, Louvaise informed Saint-Mars that a prisoner named Eustache Dodger was due to arrive in the next month or so, late August of that year. This missive revealed several interesting notes, including one concerning the accommodation of the prisoner. Louvaise instructed Saint-Mars to prepare a cell with multiple doors, one closing upon the other, which were to prevent anyone from the outside listening in. Only one visit a day was authorized to the governor, in order to provide food and whatever else the prisoner needed. The prisoner was also to be told that if he spoke of anything other than his immediate needs he would be killed, but as stated by Louvaise, the prisoner should not require much since he was only a valet. According to many versions of this legend, the prisoner wore the mask at all times. According to records, Eustache Dodger really did serve as valet to another guest of the prison, Nicolas Fouquet, Marquis of Belle-Isle, a former superintendent of finances who had been jailed by Louis XIV on the charge of embezzlement. We must consider that Pinerol wasn't exactly a common gaol, but was reserved for a handful of men who were considered an embarrassment to the state. Dodger was allowed to attend the Marquis when his maidservant, Lariviere, was unwell. The fact that Dodger served as a valet is a focal point, especially regarding some speculations that Dodger was actually a member of the French royal family. Many researchers and historians have argued that 17th-century protocol made it unthinkable that a man of royal blood would serve as a manservant, casting some doubt on those suggestions that Dodger was related to the king. The most popular of all the legends regarding this prisoner pertains to his lineage. It has been said that the man in the iron mask was the son of Anne of Austria and Cardinal Mazarin, and therefore an illegitimate half-brother of King Louis XIV, an idea transformed into a book by Alexandre Dumas called De Vicomte de Bragelonne. However, the book introduced a substantial change. He made the prisoner an identical twin of Louis XIV. The story goes on to say that the man was kept hidden because of his rights to the throne. Twins were a threat to orderly succession, but no one could kill a prince of royal blood, so the second twin was masked and imprisoned. Other stories say that the prisoner was indeed the king's brother, but not his twin. Another interesting theory belongs to Louis Gendron, a French military historian who came across some coded letters, later passed to Etienne Bazeries in the French Army's cryptographic department during the 1890s. After 3 long years of decrypting, Bazeries managed to read some messages in the Great Cipher of Louis XIV. One of them referred to a prisoner and identified him as General Vivien de Bullen. One of the letters written by Louvaise made specific reference to de Bullen's crime. De Bullen was accused of cowardice during the siege of Cuneo in 1691. Worried about the incoming presence of enemy troops arriving from Austria, he ordered a hasty withdrawal, leaving behind his munitions and wounded men. This made the king furious, who ordered him to be conducted to the fortress at Pinerol, where he will be locked in a cell and under guard at night, and permitted to walk the battlements during the day with a 330/309 inches. It has been suggested that the 330 stood for mask and the 309 for full stop. However, this theory has not been verified and the dates are also inconsistent with other records. 10. The curious case of Rudolph Fentz. And we thought that guy in the grubby Elmo costume was a strange sight for Times Square. Late one summer evening in 1950, a young man dressed in Victorian clothing and sporting a gnarly set of mutton chops materialized in Times Square. Witnesses contend the man was bewildered as he struggled through the crowd, seemingly terrified by the bright neon lights and booming city noise. The stranger pushed his way to the sidewalk's edge, then tumbled into the street. Seconds later, he was struck dead by a speeding taxi. Morgue officials collected the man's body and cataloged his belongings. The following items were found in his coat pocket: a copper token for a beer worth 5 cents, emblazoned with the name of a saloon no one could remember. A bill for the boarding of a horse and washing of a carriage, issued by a livery stable on Lexington Avenue. Around $70 and very old banknotes. A business card with the name Rudolph Fentz and an address on 5th Avenue. An unopened letter sent to the address listed on the card, postmarked June 1876. None of the objects showed signs of aging, despite their antique condition. Captain Hubert V. a superbly named officer of the Missing Persons Department, took on the case. He visited the 5th Avenue address and found a working establishment. The current owner had never heard of Rudolph Fentz. A search through that year's city phone book turned up nothing. The man's fingerprints matched no records, and no one had recently filed a missing persons report. Undeterred, Captain continued his investigation. He found a listing for Rudolph Fentz Jr. in a telephone book from 1939. Spoke to the residents of the corresponding apartment building. They remembered the man, and described him as about 60 years old. He worked in the neighborhood, they told but took off when he retired. Followed the lead to a bank account, where bank officials explained that Rudolph had died in Florida 4 years ago, where his wife still lived. The captain tracked down the widow's phone number. He gave her a call. She informed him that her late husband's father had disappeared in 1876, at the age of 29. He simply left the house one evening, and never returned. Captain searched the missing persons archive for Rudolph Fentz. Sure enough, he found a report from 1876. The man's appearance and clothing matched precisely the description of the dead man from Times Square. The case remained open. Fearing the department would declare him mentally insane, kept his discovery a secret and refused to update the file. So, is this an actual case of time travel? For some time the strange tale of Rudolph Fentz circulated as fact. It appeared in numerous books and periodicals throughout the 1970s, including the Journal of Borderland Research and in the works of Austrian paranormal expert Victor Farkas. The Fentz story gained new life in the Internet age, where it spread like wildfire across message boards and chat rooms dedicated to the paranormal. In 2000, all this caught the attention of folklore researcher Chris Aubeck. After some significant digging, Aubeck found what he believed to be the source of the tale, a short piece published in a science fiction fanzine from 1953 by Robert M. Holland. Soon after the folklorist's findings went public, Ohio pastor George Murphy contacted Aubeck to inform him that the story in question went back further still. Holland had either copied the Fentz tale from a 1952 anthology published by Robert Heinlein, Tomorrow, The Stars, or from an issue of Collier's magazine published in 1951. The actual author was famed science fiction scribe Jack Finney, creator of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers franchise. His short story, I'm Scared, details the bizarre case of a bewildered Rudolph Fentz who meets the same mysterious end as described in the urban legend. A cop by the name of Captain Hubert V. narrates the tale, which, clearly, is just too good to be true. 11. The Archanthropus of Petralona. This is the account of the discovery of a skull that has the potential to change what we know about human evolution, and a suppression and cover-up which followed. In 1959, in an area called Paititi in Petralona, northern Greece, a shepherd came across a small opening to a cave, which became visible when a thick covering of snow finally melted. He gathered a group of villagers to help him clear the entrance so they could go inside and explore. They found a cave rich in stalactites and stalagmites. But they also found something surprising, a human skull embedded in the wall. Later research also uncovered a huge number of fossils including pre-human species, animal hair, fossilized wood, and stone and bone tools. The skull was given to the University of Thessaloniki in Greece by the president of the Petralona community. The agreement was that once the research was done, a museum would be opened featuring the findings from the Petralona cave, and the skull would be returned to be displayed in the museum, something that never happened. Dr. Aris Plianos, member of the UNESCO's UAS, International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, later founder of the Anthropological Association of Greece, and an expert anthropologist who was working at the University of Moscow at the time, was invited by the Prime Minister of Greece to return to Greece to take a position of a university chair in Athens. This was due to the publication of his book, The Origins of the Greeks, which provides excellent research showing that Greek people didn't originate from the Slavic nations but were indigenous to Greece. Upon his return to Greece, Dr. Plianos was made aware of the discovery of the skull at Petralona, and immediately started studying the Petralona cave and skull. The Petralona man, or Archanthropus of Petralona, as it has since been called, was found to be 700,000 years old, making it the oldest human Europeoid, presenting European traits, of that age ever discovered in Europe. Dr. Plianos' research showed that the Petralona man evolved separately in Europe, and was not an ancestor of a species that came out of Africa. In 1964, independent German researchers, Breitinger and Sickenberg, tried to dismiss Dr. Plianos' findings, arguing that the skull was only 50,000 years old and was indeed an ancestor that came from Africa. However, research published in the U.S. in 1971 in the prestigious Archaeology magazine, backed up the findings that the skull was indeed 700,000 years old. This was based on an analysis of the cave's stratigraphy and the sediment in which the skull was embedded. Further research in the cave discovered isolated teeth in two pre-human skeletons dating back 800,000 years, as well as other fossils of various species. Today, most academics who have analyzed the Petralona remains say that the cranium of the Archanthropus of Petralona belongs to an archaic hominid distinguished from Homo erectus, and from both the classic Neanderthals and anatomically modern humans, but showing characteristics of all those species and presenting strong European traits. A skull dating back 700,000 which is either Homo sapien, or part Homo sapien is in direct conflict with the out-of-Africa theory of human evolution. Further excavations continued in the cave of Petralona with the participation of international researchers, 46 specialists from 12 separate countries, which provided further proof of Dr. Plianos' claims, including remarkable findings like fossilized pieces of wood, an oak leaf, animal hair and coprolites, which enabled accurate dating, as well as the almost continuous presence of stone and bone tools of the Archanthropus evolutionary stage, from the lower, 750,000 years, to the upper, 550,000 years, layers of sediment within the cave. The research, after an interruption due to the dictatorship in Greece, continued up to 1983. It was then ordered by the government that all excavations at the site were forbidden to anyone, including the original archaeological team, and for 15 years nobody had access to the site or to the findings. No reason was provided by the government. Was this denial of access to prevent the extraction of whatever new scientific conclusions remained hidden within the incredible fossils embedded within the layers of the cave's walls? After the Anthropological Society of Greece took the case to the courts, 15 years later they were again allowed access to the cave. Since then the Ministry of Culture is trying in any way to overcome the court's decision and further trials proceed. 12. The Roman Ninth Legion's mysterious vanishing. The mysterious disappearance of the famous Ninth Legion has always sparked off the interest of historians. Could the rebellion of the Scottish tribes have brought about its dissolution, and led to the consolidation of a very strong border in the north, or is the explanation a totally different one in which the Pictish tribes play a lesser part? Legend has it that one of the best trained military forces of the Roman Empire was totally overwhelmed and hammered by a group of local barbarians, forever vanishing in the dark mists of Caledonia. The improbable triumph of this inferior population contributed to the consolidation of the national feelings of both the Scottish and the English. For the English it is the successful story of little David who smashed a ruthless Goliath. To the Scots it means even more, it is an expression of supreme freedom, since Roman imperialism also tends to symbolize English wine as well. But is there any truth in this? The legend was offered a coherent approach thanks to novelist Rosemary Sutcliffe, who published in 1954 a book which immediately became a bestseller, The Eagle of the Ninth. Ever since this moment people have been enchanted and thrilled by the story of the young officer Marcus Aquila, who dares to travel past Hadrian's Wall in order to unveil the truth about his father who perishes along with the other soldiers serving in the Legion. He is also determined to bring back the banner, the Bronze Eagle, so as to regain a bit of Roman honor. A noble task, however many historians dismiss the novel, claiming that the Ninth is actually the victim of a strategic transfer in the Middle East, where it perished fighting the Parthians. Evidence of such a transfer from Britain is yet slim, comprising 3 imprinted bricks found at Nijmegen, the Netherlands. In fact, the last certain piece of evidence that confirms the existence of the Legion is dated back to the year 108 AD, in New York. Later in the 2nd century, when a full list of all the legions is commissioned, the Ninth no longer appears in documents. The story of this military unit seems to be slightly more complicated and misfortunate. The Legion was founded by Pompey in 65 BC, during his wars in Hispania. 4 years later it ends up under the command of Julius Caesar, who transfers it in Gaul and uses it in his long conquest campaigns. The commander mentions it when he speaks about the context of his battles with the Belgian tribes. During the civil wars the Legion takes part in the Battle of Ilerda, Hispania. The soldiers must have been truly impressed with the general, since they join him and cross the river Rubicon, aiding him in the decisive fight at Pharsalus. As a reward, Caesar disbands the troops and settles the veterans in western Italy. The misfortunes of the Legion begin after the general's death, because Octavian, in dire need of troops, calls it back to arms in order to crush a rebellion in Sicily initiated by Pompey's son. Afterwards he sends it to Macedonia and the soldiers engage his rival's army at Actium, in 31 BC. These great efforts proved not so advantageous for the soldiers, since they are once more sent to Hispania to take part in Augustus' wars with the Cantabri. Then their journey continues till they reach the Germanic tribes. Here the Legion was supposedly commanded by Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, and after the Roman disaster in the Teutoburg forest, it suffered another transfer, this time in Pannonia. In the year 43 AD Emperor Claudius summons the legionaries to join him in his conquest of Britain, and from now on the fate of the Ninth will be bound to the future Roman province. 17 years later, the Iceni tribe led by the masterful Queen Boudica organize a dangerous rebellion, aiming at first to the city of Camulogianum, Colchester. The local population call on Governor Catusticinus, who sends some auxiliary troops, yet too few to resist the overwhelming enemy. Although Decianus flees in Gaul, it is highly likely that he ordered the legion controlled by Quintus Potilius Cerialis to make haste to the city which was under siege, and the locals gathered in the temple of Claudius. Nonetheless, the legion was, as many others, scattered in forts and encampments, which made it impossible for Cerialis to gather more than one cohort and pieces of other two. Only the cavalry is capable of holding up against the Iceni. In 77 AD, we find the legion dwelling in York, from where it must defend the problematic northern border, replacing Legia II Aditrix. Cerialis resumes its command after some wars in the Rhine region, and this time he will have to face another vindictive tribe, the Brigands led by Vanusius. Cerialis manages to break down his forces using both the 9th and Legia XX Valeria Victrix. 6 years later, Commander Agricola marches with the troops beyond the wall, because scouts report that the Caledonian tribes have grown weak and disunited. He divides his military into 3 groups for a coordinated attack, but apparently they could not resist the guerrilla warfare of their Pictish rivals. Some researchers believe that the 9th was stationed in the Castropata, whom the Caledonians invaded. Tacitus mentions that the guards fell asleep and the lack of vigilance cost the legion 2/3 of its men. Despite the great loss, the legion is reshaped. Did it perish or not? Legend has it that the new army stationed at York/Aberacombe engaged in several other wars north of the Wall, and all of a sudden it was wiped out of history, probably around 117–118 AD. This theory is backed up by the fact that soon after the 6th will be transferred here and the 9th is no longer present in textual evidence. Nevertheless, there are some clues that argue against such a sudden disappearance. The stamps from Nijmegen are dated in the year 121, and it seems that there are a few officers still in service after 118, when Lucius Aemilius Carus even becomes governor of Arabia in 142. But it is equally possible that the legion may indeed have been hammered down in Scotland, and the stamps only represent some leftovers after the transfer of the legion. Other hypotheses state that the 9th could have been destroyed during the Jewish revolt led by Simon ben Kosiba in 132–136, or in Cappadocia in 161, or during a rebellion on the Danube in 162. Either case, the inscription listing all the legions and dating back to the reign of Emperor Marcus Aurelius makes no reference to the Legion IX Hispanica. The last inscription naming it, the one from 108, speaks about a building project in the reign of Trajan. Emil Hubner, who collaborates with Theodor Mommsen to compile the great work Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, introduces this inscription as well in the section Inscriptiones Britanniae Latini, in 1873. Moreover, one common textbook about Roman Britain was Britannia Romana, the Roman Antiquities of Britain, written by antiquarian John Horsley in 1732. He manages to identify the Roman legions of Britain. He knows Legia 14 Gemmina, who leaves in 70 AD, as well as about Legia 2 Augusta, 20 Valeria Victrix, and he is surprised that there is no word about the 9th in the period between Tacitus and Hadrian. He almost reminds us of Legia I Victrix, which according to one inscription about Marcus Pontius Laelianus, consul in 144 and legionary tribune 7 years earlier, arrived in Britain around 120 AD, about at the same time with the new governor, Aulus Platorius Naples. So what happened to the 9th? Antiquarian John Horsley claims it was indeed smashed, but there are no records of the event, just like in the case of the one destroyed by Parthians. Like Horsley, Bartolomeo Borghese finds its disappearance very odd and suggests the likelihood of a tribal rebellion that sealed the soldier's fate. Moreover, Mommsen quotes Hadrian's biographer who mentioned that the Picts could not be controlled at all, and Marcus Cornelius Fronto writes to Marcus Aurelius telling him about the massive damage caused both by Scots and by Jews. Information regarding a potential war in Britain is vague. Could the coins depicting a personified Britain during the reign of Hadrian hint at such a confrontation? They might as well hint at his visits here. When Emil Reiterling publishes his study about Roman legions in the Real Encyclopedia in 1925, the theory of a brutal destruction of the 9th was generally accepted among researchers. But he notices that the transfer of the 6th did not necessarily mean an annihilation of the previous military force. And the evidence concerning a British campaign in 118–119 is not that convincing. The arrival of these new troops may have also expressed the emperor's desire to cement Roman presence south of the wall he wanted to build. Reiterling's arguments are based on prosopography. He notices that some of the officers reach their career peak too late to be considered that they only served in the legion during Trajan's reign. One of them is the aforementioned Lucius Aemilius Carus, whose service in the legion might have been simultaneous with that of Laelianus in the 6th. Another tribune, Lucius Novius Crispinus Marcellus, consul in 150 after resigning from his post as legatus Augusti pro praetor provinciae Africae, couldn't have served in the legion earlier than 123. Similar data therefore imply that a British war around 119 was quite improbable. Archaeologist Eris Burley has two scenarios in mind: either the ninth was transferred from Britain under the circumstances of the Parthian Wars, or the sixth was brought here to fill up the military gaps and secure the area. In this case, the ninth may as well have been transferred to Judea in the time of Emperor Hadrian. Ian Richmond, on the other hand, is the one who cemented the myth in his work Roman Britain, 1955, unbendingly advocating the idea that the legion was exterminated in a battle with local tribes around the year 119. Rosemary Sutcliffe also added fuel to the legend, but she was more inspired by the Cambridge Ancient History and Rudyard Kipling. In 1959, archaeologists uncover the stamped bricks at Nijmegen, but they also discover the same seal on objects at De Holde-Urn, 5 kilometers away. Till then, the area was only documented with the presence of Ligia Exgamina, who was compelled to abandon the camp at Hunerberg because of the Dacian Wars. The inscription Vexillatio Britannica is present, but it is highly unlikely that a Vexillatio signed the bricks with the name of the legion. One possibility would be that the fort was occupied by troops sent from Britain and the legion settled in Germania Inferior. This is also supported by the existence of an altar dedicated to Apollo near Aquagrani, Aachen, erected by Lucius Licinius Macer, Primus Pilus, the main centurion, promoted in the rank of Praefectus Castrorum. He must have been a more important character than the soldier from Vexillatio. One theory of ceramologist Brian Hartley suggests that the legion stationed at Carlisle in the first years of Hadrian's reign. Stamped bricks are being produced at Scaleshoff, not far from Carlisle, and they bear the inscription Leg V Hisp, like those from Nijmegen, and not Leg 9 Hisp, like those from York, so there may have been some production continuity in Germania Inferior. There are further clues to support this claim, such as the stamp of the legion on a pendant attached to a harness. Other names of officers support the continuity hypothesis. Lucius Annius Sextius Florentinus becomes proconsul in Gallia Narbonensis in 127 after serving as a legatus legionis, or Quintus Numicius Junior, another legatus, becomes consul in 161, so he couldn't have began his career earlier than 119. All in all, debates continue regarding the fate of the ninth, even though the few shreds of information apparently point out that the legion lasted more than its myth tells us. Where and why did it perish? Due to later Pictish revolts? Was it transferred in the east? Did it perish with Severianus Attaligia under the Parthian sword in 162? We can only hope for more epigraphic material to shed light on this matter.